G'day and welcome to Melbourne, Australia. My name is Hugo from Localing Private Experiences, and today I'm coming to you from my home of Melbourne. This is the most livable city in the world, the cultural capital of Australia, and definitely the best city in Australia. We're very excited to have you here for your next conference, fingers crossed. And I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes showing you my home and the parts of Melbourne that I love. Now, there will be a quiz at the end of this video, so make sure you're paying attention and you put yourself in the running for the incredible prize that we have on offer. More details on the prize to come. Now, I'd also like to recognize that where I'm standing right here is only a young city in international terms. In fact, it's only in 1835 that a ship comes up Yarra River here, docks and unloads the very first European settlers to this area. There have been people though on this land for much, much longer. So we'd like to recognise the people of the Kulin Nation who have inhabited this land for at least 60,000 years, potentially several tens of thousands of years more, and recognise them as the traditional custodians, paying respect to their elders, past, present and emerging. Now this is, as we said, quite a young city and a lot has happened in 186 years of our existence. So I'm going to show you some of that. I'm going to go through some of the history, show you my favourite aspects of Melbourne, and we might finish with probably the most Melbourne thing we could be doing. That's all coming up. I'll see you right in the heart of the CBD very shortly. See you soon. Welcome to Melbourne's CBD, or Central Business District. Around here though, we just call it the city. And you are right now in the cultural capital of Australia. You see, down here in Melbourne, we like to think of ourselves as the most sophisticated, the most vibrant and cultural city in the country. Now, whether or not that's the case, the rest of the country likes to think that we're just a bit stuck up ourselves and we think we're cooler than what we are. But maybe I'll let you decide. Right now, we're standing in front of De Grave Street. This is certainly one of the most famous laneways of Melbourne. And if you come to this city, someone is going to tell you very quickly to don't spend too much time on the main streets. You need to get into the laneways because that is where the best aspects of this city are found. The beating heart of Melbourne is not on those big, wide boulevards that we have. It's in these narrow, smaller streets, and it's only quite a recent phenomenon. So we're going to go and have a look at De Grave Street and Centre Place, two of Melbourne's most famous laneways, and work out how and why this laneway culture came about. Let's go. So we have to go back to 1836. That is when the city of Melbourne is constructed, and it's constructed on a grid system. That is what is dictated by the British government at the time. We're quite thankful today because unlike Sydney, Melbourne has these beautiful wide streets, 99 feet wide. But every second street was something a bit smaller. A third of the width, in fact, 33 feet wide. There is one man who is the surveyor of this city as it's being built. His name is Mr. Robert Hoddle. So hence this grid, this mile by half mile grid, is known as the Hoddle grid today. Now, interspersed with these smaller 33 foot wide streets were these access lanes, and for a long time there were areas to be avoided because this is where your rubbish, your trash, your human waste would be thrown. It stank as well. Melbourne didn't have a sewerage system until 1892. That's about 50 years after we were founded. So it's no surprise that we had the nickname of Smelbourne. Good one, guys. For a lot of our history. In fact, where we are right here, De Grave Street, this was a public urinal for the longest time. Ugh. Luckily, as you can see, that has all changed. This is now the beating heart of Melbourne. We love brunch. We're obsessed with brunch. Most people here are having coffee because we are obsessed with coffee, and probably avocado or eggs on toast. And it's one Danish man in particular who we have to credit as helping transform the city. He was employed by the council who wanted to revitalise Melbourne. We recognised that, yeah, Melbourne had become a bit stale. In fact, US soldiers who were stationed in Melbourne during the Second World War, they described Melbourne as just like New York Cemetery. Harsh, right? They said Melbourne was just like New York Cemetery, except it was half the size and twice as dead. Ouch, that hurts. Luckily today that is certainly not the case, with these vibrant laneways giving us some of the best bars, restaurants, eateries, anywhere in the country, and the best coffee as well. I mentioned coffee before. If you come to Melbourne, you're going to have to drink like a local, and that means a flat white. Now, Sydney or New Zealand, depending on who you ask, I like to think they invented or popularised the flat white, but it's just like a latte with an extra shot, and it's less frothy, so it's better. So I'm going to come to my favourite cafe right here, Jungle Juice. You know it's good because it's not a Starbucks, and I'm going to grab a flat white with my reusable cup. This is a keep cup. This was invented right here in Melbourne. You'll find a lot of Melburnians carrying these cups and getting their favourite cup of coffee from their local barista. So I'm going to grab one of these, and I'm going to see you at the Block Arcade very shortly. That hit the spot. I needed that. I am now standing, as promised, in front of the Block Arcade. What is an arcade? It's not where video games are found, but this was the place to be if you had a bit of money in the post-gold rush era of Melbourne. You see, Melbourne, as we know, was founded in only 1835, but by the 1880s, this city had undergone a remarkable transformation. We are talking from a few thousand people to 500,000 people by that decade's end. And this city was probably the richest city in the world at that time. The amount of gold that was brought in was about $30 billion worth in today's terms. They were found in towns just north of the city, about 2 hours north, in fact. Ballarat, Beechworth, Bendigo. This completely transformed this area that could have been described before as nothing more than a sleepy wool port, the very edge of the civilized world, into a city that could compare itself with a London, a Rome, or a Paris of its day. G'day, we've got some friendly locals here too. How you doing? The Block Arcade is a fantastic representation of the result of all that wealth. You see, this is new money, and when you have a society with a lot of money, what do you need to do? You need to show it off. You need to flaunt your cash. You need to spend it. The Block Arcade was the place to do that. In fact, it was very common for the men to line up right here and walk through the Block Arcade in one direction, with the women lining up at the other direction, or the other entrance rather, walking the opposite direction. So it was kind of like a singles meeting place. It was the Tinder of its day, ladies and gentlemen. You could swipe left or swipe right. Now, things moved a bit quicker in the dating scene back then, so perhaps you could introduce yourself to a prospective partner, invite them to the theatre, and then who knows, within a few months, you may even be getting married. So let's walk through the Block Arcade, a circuit so famous that it had its own term. It was known as doing the block back in this post-gold rush era. So right now, we're going to be doing the block. Isn't she gorgeous? We also are lucky enough to have one of the most gorgeous tea rooms in all of Australia right here. In fact, this has been here since the Block Arcade opened all the way back in 1892. This is the most photographed window in Melbourne, for good reason, as you can see. You can also find very famous Australian dessert, the pavlova, just here. That was named after, or named for, rather, the Russian ballerina who was touring Australia and New Zealand. Now, I'm sure there's some Kiwis listening here. The New Zealanders will vehemently claim that they invented the pavlova, and perhaps that's true, but we will never admit it to them. So the Australian pavlova is what I will be referring it to. So this beautiful contrast between these grungy, vibrant laneways and the opulence of the post-Gold Rush era. By the way, if anybody has been to Milan, you might have a sense of familiarity, and that's because, yes, we were heavily inspired. We copied this from the Plaza Vittorio Emanuele, right in the heart of Milan. But isn't it nice that we have a little piece of Italy right here in Melbourne? Now, from here, I'm going to take you out to some of the neighborhoods that make this city special. We're going to head north first, and I'm going to see you in Fitzroy in just a moment. See you soon. Welcome to Fitzroy. This is the coolest suburb in Melbourne, supposedly. I'm definitely no authority on cool. But Brunswick Street just here, it's just a 10-minute tram ride north of the CBD. And Fitzroy, I think, is one of the most fascinating areas to visit in all of Melbourne. It has quite a storied history. You see, we have thousands upon thousands of people flocking in to Melbourne once the gold rush has been announced. But there's nowhere for these people to live or to stay. I mean, Melbourne is only 15 years old at this point. So a temporary tent city is set up right here in an area then called Newtown. Now, this is an area that the criminals and the gangs were very soon to take control of. And indeed, parts of Fitzroy remained that way for about close to 100 years. Luckily, though, we had some saints amongst us. Well, one in particular, Mary MacKillop, also did a lot of her charity work in this area, and she remains Australia's only saint. Now, luckily as well, we have cheap property prices because a lot of people would only be living here. They really could afford nowhere else to be. Now, when you have cheap property prices, what happens? You get the creative types, the poor, the students who move in, and we are so thankful they did because they helped transform this area. Today, Fitzroy is famous for its vibrant street art community, its amazing diverse cafe, bars and restaurants, for its live music scene. In fact, Melbourne is arguably the live music capital of the world. It's suburbs like Fitzroy and to the north, Brunswick, that have more live music venues per capita than anywhere else in the world. And there still remains a great community here in Fitzroy. I mean, we have a community library. It's the Fitzroy Street Library. You can grab a book and give a book. No need for a library card. How good is that? You'll also see some of the best coffee roasteries in this area here. Here's one of my favorites, Industry Beans. You can tell it's cool just by looking at it, can't you? Reclaimed timber shipping pallets. You can tell by the crowds as well. It's very popular and for good reason. As we walk down here, you'll also notice some of the amazing street art in this area, as we talked about. There's a number of street art studios and a really supportive community in this area who spend a lot of their time luckily practicing on the walls around Fitzroy and its neighbouring suburb of Collingwood. Now, as we come up here, I'm going to finish off on one of the hidden gems of Fitzroy. These are the Rose Street markets. Melbourne is famous for many markets. The Queen Victoria markets in the city, the biggest markets in the Southern Hemisphere, but this market is a little different. This is a maker's market. It's filled with people who make their own goods, jewelry, clothing, ceramics, and the people who are working at these stalls are usually the artists themselves, or they know directly who has made their products. So I'm going to head in here and have a quick look, and I'm going to catch you next south of the river. Ooh, we're heading south. I'm going to take you into St Kilda and show you what I love about that seaside suburb down there. See you in just a moment. Ooh, that's good. Hey, welcome to St Kilda. This is Melbourne's playground. Just a 25-minute tram ride south of the CBD. We find ourselves right here, Luna Park, or Big Mouth, as we locally call him. Now, Luna Park is famous in particular for this wooden roller coaster. This has been operating continuously since 1912, ladies and gentlemen, and that makes it one of the oldest roller coasters in the world and one of the few remaining that requires someone to stand on top of the roller coaster with a big lever that controls the brakes. So a lot of trust placed in that person. Just behind Luna Park is Port Phillip Bay. Melbourne sits atop of this very large expanse of water. To travel around the bay and get to some of the famous beaches of Melbourne will take you a bit longer. So we're talking about the Great Ocean Road or Mornington Peninsula. These places well worth a day trip. In fact, you can do in one day, but we advise two here at Localing Private Experiences to do the 12 Apostles and the Great Ocean Road. These are limestone stacks that are out in the middle of the Southern Ocean or Pacific Ocean, and they're slowly crumbling, very slowly. Though one did collapse about 10 years ago. There were never 12 of them though. Just sounds better for marketing purposes, but well worth the trip to the Great Ocean Road and to see the 12 Apostles. Also well worth your time to come down to St Kilda, because while the north and the northern suburbs of Fitzroy and Collingwood are cool and hip, St Kilda's fun. You know, it doesn't take itself too seriously. It was always a really fun day trip when I was growing up as a kid if we were going to St Kilda. We could go to the beach, have fish and chips, ice cream, and importantly, hit up the cake shops on Ackland Street, the main drag here in St Kilda. There was a big Jewish migration during the war, particularly from Eastern Europe, Jewish refugees, and a lot of them settled around this St Kilda area, and luckily for us, brought some of their baking and cooking skills with them, and a lot of those cake shops still remain. Our favourite here at Localing, Monarch's Cakes. Now, when you come to St Kilda, make sure you hit up Monarch and make sure you get their baby Hugo. This is a Polish style or German Polish style cake, and I'm lucky enough that I've snagged the last one today. So I'm going to finish off my trip to St Kilda with a baby Hugo. Get them to warm it up for you as well. Look at that. I'll see you soon back at the most Melbourne spot we could think of. See you soon. Oh, good. Well, here we are. We've made it to the most Melbourne spot in Melbourne. I'm standing in front of the most famous sporting ground in the Southern Hemisphere, the Melbourne Cricket Ground, better known as the MCG, or if you're a local, just the G. We're very lazy in Australia. Any opportunity to shorten words, we will. Now, the most famous events that occur at this stadium are the cricket and the footy. And by footy, I mean Australian rules football, a sport that was invented in this city over 150 years ago, and now it is a very passionate pursuit for the locals of this city in particular. Now, if you want to do something that's very Melburnian, you should go to a game of footy at the G, go inside and just announce loudly that you're not from here and you'd like to know what's going on. This is like the equivalent of going to a Jehovah's Witness convention and saying you're interested in Jesus, because you'll get all these passionate people coming up to you, friendly locals, very quickly trying to explain the game to you. But you've made an instant friend, and hopefully after the 2 hours of watching this game that'll look like headless chickens just running around chasing a ball, you'll have an appreciation for the game of football, or at least an appreciation for the passion that it's held here in the locals' hearts. So that is pretty much Melbourne. Well, that's my Melbourne, at least. I'm going to go to this game of footy, and I'll see you very shortly